It's a real pleasure to welcome to BBC Radio Scotland one of my all-time favourite bands, and the two guys who front that band, Ron and Russell Mail of Sparks. How are you?
Good, yeah.
Doing well.
Russell, we've been playing tracks from the band's great new album on the programme in recent weeks. The record is called The Girl Is Crying in Her Latte. It's a celebration of your 50-year career. What kind of record did the two of you set out to make this time?
Well, I mean, each time we start a new record, we don't really speak about it, but we know we have to do something and want to do something that if it were to be the first album that anyone would ever hear from Sparks, that it would be as striking of an example of what we do as anything else, any other record we've made, that we have to assume that someone might just discover the band now, and we want it to be something that they would go, this doesn't sound like a band that has a 26 album long career.
And I mean, Ron, when you go into the studio, do you have to kind of put everything that has gone previously to one side, and as Russell said, start as if you're starting with a blank sheet of paper and you're back at the first record again?
We try to do that as much as we can. I mean, we have such a strong sensibility about what we do that that's something that carries over without us being kind of conscious of it. But as far as we can, we try to forget what we've done in the past. You have just certain stylistic flourishes that are going to be there all the time, but as best we can, we do, because we don't want to have it, sound obviously like a rehash of something we've done before. So, I mean, it'll be, just recognizable in a certain sense just because it's us, but we do try to kind of start from a clean slate, as you say.
Russell, inevitably you must look at your incredible back catalogue over the previous albums, starting away back in 1973. Does that put any kind of, whether you like it or not, unconscious pressure on the both of you, because you have such a wealth of incredible material over those years? Do you always have to try and sort of set out to at least equal it or try and go one better?
Well, I mean, I guess we're lucky that we do have that kind of motivation to want to just do something that's not a rehash of what we've done. And I guess it's not always the case with groups that have a really long careers. A lot of groups maybe have the good situation to be able to just tour, and maybe stick in one of their new songs off their latest album, or not even do any songs off their latest album because they're not even that proud of it. But we really proud of what we're doing now, and we don't want to be relying just on our past careers. So we're even with the new tour, we're going to be doing quite a few songs off of the new album, just because we really like the new album and hope and think that that our fans are also going to really like it as well. So we're always puzzled when don't want to present some of their new material live. It's always odd to us.
And also, we're fortunate that the people that come to see us, they're not only just accepting of kind of a challenge, they really welcome that and kind of know that when we're playing that there will be some challenges. And I don't, that probably isn't true for every band.
Now, one of the first singles from the album, and we've been playing it on the programme, is the title track of the record, which once again is called The Girl Is Crying in Her Latte. Now, when I think of that, I think of things like, not in a musical sense, but, Meatloaf, I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. Or Travis, why does it always rain on me? Is it because I lied when I was 17? Are we ever, over the next few weeks, months or years, going to discover why the girl was crying in her latte?
Well, probably not.
I knew you were going to say that.
Well, we kind of like this little story, and a lot of stories that we have where kind of the listener comes in the middle of a situation that's been happening, and then the song also ends and you're not quite sure as to what the resolution of that situation was. In this case, this is girl sitting at this cafe daily crying in her latte, and then she leaves and another girl comes and replaces her at the exact same table, and the narrator of the song kind of is wondering exactly what it is that's causing these young ladies to be having such a sad time. And he's pondering, is it due to the rain, or is it just something benign that he can't quite figure it out? And the story ends, and we still don't have any better clue as to what the reason is. But it's kind of maybe speaking about the solitude and kind of loneliness that a lot of people are feeling, where you are alone, you go in the cafe and you're sitting there on your own for whatever reason, and that it's not always such a happy time sipping your cup of coffee.
There'll be people walking about all over the world for the next 6 months scratching their heads going, why is the girl crying in her latte? But I think that's a good explanation. Let's hear the track now from the brand new album from Ron and Russell Mael of Sparks. This is The Girl Is Crying in Her Latte.
Wow, the girl is crying in her latte bed.
This is Billy Sloan on BBC Radio Scotland with my special guests Ron and Russell Mael of Sparks. We're talking about their brand new album, which is a great record called The Girl Is Crying in Her Latte. And we just heard the title track, which was a recent single. And what also stood out for the song was you made a brilliant video with the Oscar-winning actress Cate Blanchett dancing beautifully as you two were kind of larking about in the background. How did that come about? How did your paths cross?
Well, we were fortunate enough to be invited to the Césars a couple of years back. A movie musical that we had done called The Net had been nominated, and we actually won for Best Music, even though we were foreigners, which was something really special to us. So, and
the Césars is a kind of French movie award ceremony, isn't it?
Well, it's the French version of the BAFTAs or the Oscars in the U.S. So, it was an incredible honor for us. But then kind of putting extra icing on the cake of that evening was we were backstage and Cate Blanchett came up and introduced herself. We would never have the courage to, speak to her first. And she said that she had been a fan when she was growing up. And so, that was our first introduction to her. And then when it came time to do we've stayed in touch through time. And when it came time to do the video, we needed a concept, and we thought, what if the concept is Cate Blanchett? And it worked. She, oddly enough, didn't need any direction from us, and, we couldn't have been more pleased.
And I mean, was it just basically a case of pointing the camera at all three of you and, saying go? Because, you, Ron, over the past few years have been known to have a few good dance moves of your own right. But, she was absolutely fantastic in the bright yellow suit right up front, wasn't she?
She put me to shame, let's put it that way. I take that without any bitterness at all. She was amazing. No, it was a thing where we didn't, other than the placement of the people in the frame, there was no thought about what anybody was going to do. But she would be the most predictable for doing something brilliant, and she did.
Russell, the new album, as I say, we've been playing some tracks from on the programme. Once again, it's called The Girl Is Crying in Her Latte. How would you describe the musical dynamic between the two of you? Because, you've made something like 26 albums over the years. So have you got the formula now, or does it change constantly as you evolve as musicians and writers in a band?
We both have our own roles within the band that kind of don't overlap so much. So the process is kind of smooth. And sometimes Ron will come into the studio with a full-fledged song already written, and then we'll kind of flesh it out and work it up from there. Or else sometimes we just come up with something in the studio while we're working, just start messing around and then seeing if any of those bits can turn into something that could actually be a complete piece. And so we have kind of both those ways of working. And the process now, because we've done it for so long, we kind of know the process, and you don't have to think too much. You just start working. And I mean, I think part of it too is this: we have a good work ethic, where we just want to get something accomplished, and you just go in and just want to see some result come out, and then sometimes you'll assess it the next day and go, ooh, I don't know what we were thinking about the day before. It doesn't sound quite as good as you thought it did. Or sometimes you have a little bit and you think, no, this maybe still has some possibilities, so we'll keep working on it. And it's just kind of a real methodical process, but just wanting to also try to make something be really special each time we go in to record.
And do you both have very defined roles? I mean, who does what?
I'm the engineer, as it were, and then I mix the stuff as well. And Ron's the chief songwriter, as you know, and the lyricist of the group, and also plays all of the musical instruments. So everything's pretty, and I do all the vocals, and so our roles are pretty clearly delineated, and come in and start at it.
My role as a non-vocalist was pretty clearly defined very early on.
And I mean, Ron, when you sit down to write a song for a New Sparks album, do you sit and write a song with this amazing voice in the back of your mind? Do you tailor what you're writing to suit his incredible vocals?
Well, I mean, not specifically for whatever his strengths are, but just with the knowledge that I can write anything and that he'll be able to handle it, vocally, which, wouldn't be the case for most other singers. And I think it's one reason why there haven't been maybe as many cover versions of Sparks songs as you might think, just because that they are delivered in a way that's very unique and unique to Russell's vocal style.
Let's have another track from the album. Once again, it's called The Girl Is Crying in Her Latte, and this is one of the earliest singles from the record. This is a great new song called Veronica Lake.
Veronica Lake, for any other girl, Veronica Lake.
Billy Sloan on BBC Radio Scotland with my special guests Ron and Russell Mail of Sparks. We're talking about your great new album, which is called The Girl Is Crying in Her Latte. And let's go right back to the very beginning, if we can, when the two of you were kind of aspiring musicians in California, because you got a taste of the kind of club scene on Sunset Strip around the Whiskey A Go-Go in the late 1960s, early 1970s. You went to see bands like, Love and The Doors, and you saw a very early gig by the Beach Boys. What was the music scene like then? Was it very kind of exciting to just dip your toe in the water?
Yeah, well, I mean, the one thing, ironically, we had those bands that you mentioned that we did like, that part of the LA scene, but there was another part of the LA scene that we were less into, the whole Laurel Canyon sort of singer, songwriter, folky guitar sort of side of LA. And so that's why we turned our sights more on the British bands that were coming to LA at the time. So we were really out there seeing everybody. We saw groups at the Whiskey A Go-Go as well when they were first starting. We saw Tyrannosaurus Rex there, pre-T-Rex, and The Move, and we saw the first performance of Led Zeppelin in LA and Pasadena, and then our mom was kind enough to drive us to go see the Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl.
What was that like? That must have been amazing.
No, it was incredible. Just, I think it was like a 25-minute long set, because that's all you needed to do if you were a Beatle back then, and no PA system. It was just the music you heard was coming out of the amplifiers on the stage, but it was, it was a amazing thing to have been able to have seen them play live in the heyday. So, and then this year we're on this tour, we're playing the very same Hollywood Bowl. So we're kind of so excited that after this long, we've finally been able to play the most iconic venue in Los Angeles, and especially because we're grown up in that city and know it so well.
I mean, I've only ever been in the Hollywood Bowl once, and I just kind of parked my car in the car park and it was empty. There was nothing on, and I just walked in and stood there. I mean, what's it going to be like when you're on that stage? And because it's not changed a bit since that Beatles gig away back in the mid-1960s, so that must be a big thrill for you, because, in your heart of hearts, did you ever think at one stage in your career you'd get to play the hallowed ground of the Hollywood Bowl?
Never. I mean, we were kind of so used to playing places like the Whiskey A Go-Go in LA, and there'd be, 5 people there and 5 waitresses, and that was it. So to actually be playing such an iconic place, and a place that we attended as fans of other bands. It's really extraordinary. It's an enormous place, and it means so much. Everybody around the world knows about the Hollywood Bowl, but to people from Los Angeles, it really is like something really is extraordinary.
You were such big fans, as you say, of, the British music scene as it was then. Was it a logical step then to kind of uproot and travel from California to London and try and get a foothold, in the music industry? Because, no sooner were you here when you were having a bit of success, and then over the next few years, people like, Morrissey and Duran and, Simple Minds and people like that were citing you as an influence. How flattering was that?
It was really flattering. And, just the fact that Island Records had wanted us to come to the UK to relocate. We'd had the 2 albums out in the States that Todd Rundgren had been producing, but they thought that maybe coming to the UK, the sensibility of what we were doing would be better received, and they were right. And then it turns out we finally got to be living our dream of being a British band, and then ironically having British bands commenting on how much they like Sparks. So it kind of came full circle.
And I mean, you're going to be playing with us very soon. You're going to be live at the Armadillo in Glasgow on the 26th of May. Do you remember the early gigs in Scotland and in the UK when you came over here at first? Because I remember seeing you away back in 1974, which would probably have been your first ever headline gig in Scotland at the legendary Apollo in Glasgow.
Yeah, I mean, we remember it well because we remember the balcony kind of swaying to and fro during that show, and so it always sticks in our mind as as an example of just the kind of the raucous nature of Glasgow audiences, and that hasn't changed through the years.
It's a gig people still talk about to this very day. We're going to hear another track from the album now. Once again, the record is called The Girl Is Crying in Her Latte, and here's another great single from the record. This is Ron and Russell Mael with Nothing Is As Good As They Say It Is. This is Billy Sloan on BBC Radio Scotland with my special guest Sparks, and we were talking about some of the people that you had influenced on the British music scene over the years, but you've also been very, very lucky over the course of your career. You've worked with some incredible people in your own right. You mentioned Todd Rundgren a few moments ago, who produced the first 2 albums, Half Nelson, and then the first Sparks album. You also worked with Tony Visconti, and most notably you worked with Giorgio Moroder on number 1 song in Heaven from the album of a similar title. What was that like? How did that come about? Because it must have been the ultimate experience for you.
No, Giorgio, it was something we had heard, the song I Feel Love that he produced with Donna Summer, and at that point in our our career, we thought we really wanted to try to shake things up in some other way musically, to do what we do with Ron's lyrics still and my vocals and his writing sensibility, but to try to put it in a different musical context. And so we managed to get in touch with Giorgio Moroder, and he hadn't at that time worked with any other bands. We were the first band that he actually worked with, and he was excited to work with us as well because he knew about our success that we had in the UK, especially at that time. And the 3 of us, that Ron and I and Giorgio, we kind of went at that out real in a naive sort of way, not knowing what the outcome was going to be, because at that time was a pretty fresh thing to take a band, we were more known as being, a band with guitar, bass, and drums, and then now to abandon those elements, but to work with electronics. And Giorgio hadn't ever worked with the band. He had been working more with solo artists like Donna Summer. So for him, it was a new experience too. So no one knew the outcome, but in the end, we were so intrigued by just the idea. And then the result was something I think that we were all really, just really excited about, that it was something really, really fresh, and had songs like Number 1 in Heaven and Beat the Clock and Trouts for the Human Race that were, different than what was happening at the time.
Was it intimidating, Ron? Because, he had made such a kind of stamp with the Donna Summer records. He'd never worked with a band before, as Russell said. So what was it like the first time you went into the studio? Because it must have been a great leap of faith, because you presumably wouldn't have known what was going to come out the other end.
No, absolutely. And we had, at that time, there weren't synthesizers that you could tour with or anything like that. It was just walls and walls of these things with red lights flashing. But, Giorgio really knew his way around that. And, he wasn't personally intimidating because he's just a really good guy, but just he was intimidating as far as being very strong, but knowing, what he was doing in that kind of studio situation. But it's what we wanted. We wanted to work with somebody who really knew about getting the sound of I Feel Love, and who better to go to but the guy who created that sound.
Was there a point when you were in the studio with him, maybe at the end of the whole recording process, where he sat you down and he pressed the button and Number One Song in Heaven came out the speakers? What was your reaction? Because it was such a different song for you two guys, and it was a real kind of breath of fresh air, at that particular time in 1979.
No, I mean, it was something. I mean, I think though we were even all, though we thought we liked it, we just didn't even know what we created. And I don't think Giorgio really knew what he created. And even at that time, the music critics in the UK were even somewhat puzzled, because they thought, well, a band has to be a guitar band. You have to have a proper band you can have one keyboard instrument, but you have to have guitars and bass and drums. And that's what a band was. But now we were a band, but there were only two people. And so I think even that kind of threw critics at the time, because they didn't quite know what to make of it. So even more so with the two of us and Giorgio in the studio, we weren't even sure what it was we created, but we thought, well, this is something special, but we don't know what it is.
Well, I think you created an absolute musical masterpiece. And even though it was recorded 41 years ago, can you believe that? 41 long years ago. It sounds as if you made the record last week. Let's hear it now from Sparks from 1979. This is the classic sound of Number One Song in Heaven. Billy Sloan on BBC Radio Scotland. It's a great pleasure to be joined in the programme by Ron and Russell Mail of Sparks. Don't forget that on the 26th of May, which ironically is the exact date that their brand new album The Girl Is Crying in Her Latte is released all across the UK, they're going to be playing live on stage at the Armadillo in Glasgow, and that's certainly a gig we're looking forward to. And over the course of the songs that you've written in recent years, you mentioned people like Edith Piaf and Frank Sinatra and Morrissey and Charlie Parker, people that you admire. Does that suggest that you're both big fans of music and cinema and all that kind of stuff yourself?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's, when we were growing up, we were never like trained musically. It was only listening to people on the radio that we admired. As far as like having a certain aesthetic about things in general, it was going to university and then going out to art cinemas and seeing French movies and Ingmar Bergman films and all. So the people whose names we drop are oftentimes people that had at least a marginal influence on us.
And I mean, have you ever come face to face with any of the people that you've so greatly admired? I mean, did you ever get to meet Morrissey after you recorded the song Lighten Up Morrissey? Did you ever run into him? What was his reaction?
No, Morrissey really liked the song. He took it in the right spirit. It wasn't supposed to be by any means a derogatory thing. It was a song about a girl and a guy, actually, and the girl had there's this couple, and she had a real infatuation with Morrissey, and he's kind of hoping that his girlfriend will pay more attention to him than she does to Morrissey, and so he's kind of speaking out loud to Morrissey, saying, "Hey, lighten up a little bit, so that I can have a little bit better relationship with my girlfriend." But we heard that Morrissey had been using that song as some of his pre-show music in the video that we did as well at his concert. So he was happy with the results, I believe.
Ron, you mentioned earlier that you had won an award for the music that you provided for the 2021 film Annette, and coincidentally that very same year there was a great documentary released called The Sparks Brothers. Why did you decide to sort of go public and make a documentary about your lives as individuals? I mean, was it a new territory for you both to move into?
Well, we weren't actually kind of pursuing doing a documentary. We've always avoided them in the past. We kind of feel that what we're doing musically is something that we prefer to be known for rather than some story about us. But we've always just loved the films of Edgar Wright. And he came to one of our shows and said, I'd really like to do a documentary on you. And just his passion and just what he had done as a director, it kind of made us, for the first time, say yes to somebody doing a documentary about Sparks. And, we were so pleased with that documentary, not only just about in a factual kind of way or how we were presented, but the fact that stylistically, it really feels like an Edgar Wright film, because we were worried that he was going to tone it down when he's working in kind of a nonfiction kind of way. But if anything, the eccentricities were even stronger in that film.
And I mean, when you both sat down to watch the finished thing, was it a strange experience to see your life and your craft and your art portrayed in this way, something that you'd never previously tackled before?
Yeah. It was strange, but really heartwarming, and especially heartwarming to see the big cast of characters that Edgar was able to enlist to be part of the film, but just such varied musicians from varied types of music, Flea from the Chili Peppers to the Duran Duran guys, Steve Jones of the Sex Pistols. It was just, amazing. And then writers like Neil Gaiman and Mike Myers, the actor, and Jack Antonoff, the amazing producer. So it was just this great cast of characters that all came to speak about what Sparks has meant for them.
Now, in 1994, you released a great album called Gratuitous Sex and Senseless Violence, and one of the main tracks on it was a song called Now That I Own the BBC. The time has never been more ripe to come in and take ownership of this great organisation that we all work for. Is that still the plan, that you're going to ride into Broadcasting House in your white Charger at one point and take us over?
We're in negotiations right now, but trust us, your job is safe.
Thank you. I was just trying to get that in very quickly. The new album, once again, it's called The Girl Is Crying in Her Latte, and it's almost brought you full circle, because, as we said earlier, it's been released on the Island record label, which, of course, was the label that you signed to way back in 1974. And, of course, you were alongside people like Jethro Tull and Free and Mott the Hoople and Cat Stevens before Island exploded and went on to sign U2 and Grace Jones, and the list is endless. Is it just nice to be back, on that iconic label with your new record?
Yeah, it really is. And especially just because, Island's signed us now, not just for nostalgic reasons, but they actually love the new album for the music that's there. And that's the most satisfying thing for us, that it was done purely for the music. And I think that's just a really unique situation where we could do an album that many decades later and the label is going, this is great, we need to sign Sparks again.
And of course, way back in 1974, I vividly remember turning on Top of the Pops, and there you were with This Town Ain't Big Enough for Both of Us, your most famous song. All these years on, Ron, do you still look back in that song with real affection? Because, there can't be anywhere you go without people recognising it and mentioning it back to you.
We're incredibly proud of that song and what it kind of launched for us. I mean, at the time, to be honest, after that song came out, it became kind of a bit of a cross to bear, where people were saying, well, it's kind of a one-trick pony, and we know that song is really something special, but to overcome the fact that it's only that one song and to kind of be known as being able to do a lot of different things is something I think we've proven through the years, and not only just in pop music, which is our main passion, but, even in film as well. So, we feel kind of more comfortable with that song now than than even at the time soon after that, where it felt like, just the pressure of, well, is that all that we're ever going to be known for? What existed.
I would love to hear what the people who wrote you off as a one-trick pony reckon now that you're on album number 26.
It's weird because I tried not to even remember what critics say one way or another, but I remember there was one critic at the time that just called us just a novelty band, and so you even at that time where every single comment kind of might have some kind of effect on what you're doing, then it mattered. But now I just laugh at all those sorts of things.
I wish you all the very best with the new album. Once again, it's called The Girl Is Crying in Her Latte. If you want to go and see Sparks, I can tell you that they're going to be playing on the 26th of May, the very day the album was released in the UK at the Armadillo in Glasgow. And we play out with that fantastic song, which sounded great in 1974. It sounds still great in 2023. This is Sparks, and this town ain't big enough for both of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks.
Take care.
Great stuff from 1974 from their second album, Kimono My House, and the sound of This Town Ain't Big Enough for the both of us. And the band are going to be live on stage at the Armadillo next Friday, which is the 26th of May, showcasing their brand new album, which is called The Girl Is Crying in Her Latte.